So recently I was talking to a friend and he gave me the advice, don't let anybody tell you should, right? Kind of a play on don't let anybody tell you shit. And it was a really great way of putting kind of what I needed to hear for a while. And that's why I wanted to come here and like share it with everyone. I was asking him for advice, and I've been asking a lot of people for advice lately just because I kind of want to pick people's brains. I think I've gotten so much more curious in that regard in like the last, a year or so. And, hearing that was like so good because advice you often get is kind of this very hoi polloi, follow your heart kind of thing, very much like, it's almost like the same advice of like, be yourself in terms of like, it sounds great and nobody will ever say it's not good advice. Like everyone hears it and is like, oh, that's like it's the most agreeable advice ever, but it's so hard to follow for no reason. And I think part of it, and this is something that like nobody ever really talks about because it's not a nice thing, I guess, I don't really know, is that like you feel really dumb following your heart. Like you just do. Because so often following your heart means going exactly against like what everyone will tell you to do. Following your heart could be dropping out of Harvard to start up a bakery down the street in central Boston. Maybe you'd end up the happiest man on earth if you did that, but everyone on earth is going to be like, no, that's a ridiculous idea. You know what I mean? It makes me think back to this one, I don't know if it was an interview or a podcast where Rick Rubin, famous music producer, was talking about this exact topic. He was like, at multiple points during my career, I did exactly what I wanted to do, unapologetically. He followed his heart, and he says it ended me up always in the exact right place I need to be, even when everyone was calling me dumb, even when everyone was saying this isn't the right thing to do. And I just thought that was so interesting because it's almost like this idea that we've discussed, like, I don't know about a lot, but a fair bit on Paint and Talk about like some things might not work out in the short term, but they'll be really great in the long term. For an example, like honesty is a big one where it's like being honest and following like the right path in that regard will get you to the right place, even if it's going to be a little tougher. It'll eventually like have a lot of long-term prosperity, right? And I think that following your heart is kind of the same thing, where like it's gonna make you end up in so much like, I don't know about so much strife, but so many just like tougher situations, whether that be financial or however that might manifest. But in the long term, I think it'll work really well. And his advice made me also think about the concept of advice in general. And I know it's a little bit paradoxical to take advice from somebody about not taking advice. Like I see the irony in that. I was thinking about that on my run yesterday. I'm gonna choose not to think about it because it kind of hurts my brain. But it did actually make me think of something very interesting that I've kind of been thinking about for a while. Is like, advice is great, but it can only ever get you as far as the other guy's shoes. You know what I mean? Someone who is a very successful senator might give you better advice than a cashier on how to become president, but the fact of the matter is, they're not the president. You know what I mean? That's a little bit of a weird analogy, but you get what I mean in terms of like, only, advice won't ever get you past the guy giving the advice because, well, they're at their station for a reason. Of course, I mean, like, I know this is factually an incorrect statement because, I mean, I've gotten advice on how to, work out from people who, I've gotten farther than them with their own advice. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's an element of discipline or, courage, will, whatever you want to apply there, that does make it so you can use someone's advice to get farther than them. Like, that's definitely true. But as a rule of thumb, right, if somebody's giving you advice, this is actually a big meta, actually, that I've heard some people talk about on YouTube, where, like, there's a lot of channels with, like, 50, 60,000 subscribers giving advice on how to be a successful YouTuber. And, no hate to them. I mean, that's more impressive than I've ever been able to do. But I think it's interesting because it's like, well, if you got all the answers, like, why aren't you using them? You know what I mean? Like, why aren't you at the top of the game if you're the guy with all the answers? Maybe it's time in, you know, it could be a variety of reasons, but it's just like kind of interesting of like people giving advice. Gurus is a huge place where I see this too, of like, there's all these online coaches now for just everything. And sometimes it's almost like if I were to start up a painting course. Like, these guys know, you know, just like I can tell you, like, you need brushes and paint to paint. They'll tell you like, oh, you need to be disciplined when you work out. Or like, you need to be good looking when you go on dating apps. You know, like, they're giving the most rudimentary advice. And I feel like there's almost this, I don't know if it's like a culture of taking advice, but I feel like maybe it's just a me thing even, where I feel very motivated to take advice, even from people who, you know, maybe don't know any better than me. And I think in a sense, it's almost a good thing. Like, I like the fact that I do that in a way, because I do think that even if, like, I agree with everything I just said, right? I don't think though, I think there's a very extreme version of this kind of sitting inside of the point I just made of like, stop listening to people and become very headstrong. And listen, if you're like a genius that can just be super headstrong and never listen to anybody again and become the greatest thing of all time, you do that. Like, that's sick, that's awesome. I'm not by any means like somebody who's gonna be doing that with their life. You know, I'm not a genius and I'm not smart enough to go headstrong without hearing anyone's input ever, right? So for this is advice, I guess, for the rest of us, or not advice, but some food for thought for the rest of us who are not in this class of geniuses who will never have to take advice in their life. That like, I think it's important to hear everybody. Like, I think just as much as I'm saying, like, you know, make sure that advice will only get you as far as the other guy's shoes, I don't think that means like you need to shut everyone out and stop taking all advice, because I mean, that's also just like a dumb thing to do. You know what I mean? Especially if you're at the beginning of something. You know, I think like, for an example, I'll ask people for advice on YouTube, friends, stuff like that, right? I'm deep enough into doing YouTube, since I've just been doing it as a hobby for a large portion of my life, that like, I'm confident when I can go like, okay, they did have some really good input about like what they liked and disliked. I'm confident enough about my own tastes and stuff to be like, this is kind of what I want to do, even if it's in the other direction of what they're telling me, right? If you're earlier into something though, I think it's actually very important to get a lot of input from a lot of people, because like, there is something amazing to be said for learning past people's own mistakes, right? If you can learn a lesson from somebody else instead of having to go out and learn it yourself, that's where advice is the most useful thing ever. And that's why I say that no matter where you are, I do think it's important to hear other people out. Just because, like, you know, there's such a thing as listening to advice and not taking it. You know what I mean? If you're shutting yourself off from all the advice you could be getting, I think that's just as dumb as taking all the advice that you could ever get. Because, like, I don't know, does that not make some sense? That, like, this is the complete wrong brush, by the way. I'm sure you guys have been seeing me completely and utterly struggle through the last, like, 10 minutes of painting. Not 10 minutes, it hasn't even been 10 minutes. The last, like, couple minutes of painting with that brush. What a terrible brush to use for that. See, that's so much better. That's way better. That was wrong move there, guys. Wrong move. Foul, or whatever the soccer term is, or football. I don't watch sports. I don't know why I'm referencing sports now. But, you know, when it comes to taking advice, right, there's such a thing as like integrating the parts of it you like and the parts of it you don't like. I've gotten, you know, I think that's where like we almost view advice and guidance and there's this concept of like mentorship that's really popular now too. I don't think that's real. Like, I don't know anybody who is like, I was mentored by somebody. Like, I think you watch too many movies if you're like really into getting a mentor. Like, if you can, that's sick. I'm jealous because like I want one because that's so cool to be like, I have my mentor has been telling me this, but like, you're not gonna get one, right? I'm a hater too. You know, as much as I'm a jealous guy, I am a hater of the mentorship stuff. But, you know, getting advice does not have to be as linear and as transactional as you tell me X, so I do X. It can be like, you tell me X, he tells me Y, I think I kind of like Z, you know? Like, there is such a thing as not taking every piece of advice you hear, and I think this is such basic advice and a piece of advice that, whoa, this is crazy, I'm giving advice about when to not take advice. So don't take this if I'm telling you, like, if I'm inadvertently in this video kind of telling you not to take my advice, then don't take it, because I also don't know shit. This is just like some observations about, you know, how I feel after being a sounding board for people, because it does become, you get to a certain point of like talking to people where, actually, let me restart. I tell everybody in my life about like basically everything I do. There's not many people in my life who I'm like genuinely close to who don't know that I, you know, do this on YouTube, or who I, or, you know about my job or anything like that. My friends, my partners, my family, you know, I keep my life very, like I was saying in a couple Paint and Talks ago, I don't compartmentalize at all. I live a very complete life, and that's awesome. It's the best thing ever. With that though, a lot of people will feel like they can tell you about everything you do, and that's great because it's awesome to have conversations about someone who genuinely knows you and knows everything going on. But with that does come the downside. Like, you need to learn how to filter out noise, because my friend who like just watches a bunch of Nelk boys and like is like, oh, I know, like your YouTube videos aren't really good because you should do fun stuff like the Nelk boys. True, the Nelk boys are much more successful than me. That's just not me though, you know what I mean? And you need to learn how to filter that out, because if you don't, then you're gonna end up being like just a million different people's interpretation of what's good, and you'll never factor yourself in, you know? You gotta learn how to take every piece of advice you get and almost like store it. Like, don't take it to heart, make sure you remember it. Don't like shrug people off, because I think that's how you turn into like Kanye West, where like you just think you know best all the time, but you only knew best up till like 2012, you know what I mean? So don't shrug people off, like take advice. Don't not listen to people, but you need to learn like that careful balance of, okay, I'm going to listen to you, I'm gonna understand what you're saying, I'm gonna see your perspective, but I'm gonna make sure at the end of the day that I keep my own perspective on top of yours, because like that's the most important thing to do. If some of your perspective after you give me this advice seeps into my own, great, beautiful, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna keep my own ideas sacred because they're my ideas, right? And I think that's the main thing about advice that's so tough, is not so much that like, there's nuggets of gold in every piece of advice you get. You could get advice from, you know, a billionaire or a homeless man. Both of them will tell you something good and something bad, I think at least, right? The hard part about advice is having to sift through that gold and get the nuggets of gold, sift through the dirt rather, and get the nuggets of gold in everyone's advice, because it exists in everything, you know? There's a lot of lessons that a homeless guy would be able to teach you that a rich man never could, but there's a whole lot of lessons that a rich man could teach you that a homeless man never could. And just because society tells you to perceive one of these people as much more successful, and the fact that one of these people is like statistically gonna be a lot happier than the other, doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to either one of them. It means that you should listen to both them and see what works in there, you know? Because I would not listen to a rich man's advice on how to like raise a happy family if he just has a good company and a sad family. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't follow a poor man's advice on how to start a great company, even if he has a super happy family, you know? Everyone's good at different things, and learning how to sort of like look through their strengths is a really valuable thing, because you don't want to be other people. I think that's the main extent here. Unless like you're best friends with somebody who you're just you got it figured out, I just want to be you, do that, sure. But unless you're this hypothetical person I just made up that like shouldn't exist, like I don't think this person exists, right? Don't do that, because again, you don't want to end up in somebody else's shoes. You want to end up in the best version of your own shoes. And that requires listening to everybody, listening to nobody, and sifting through all the dirt to find the nuggets of gold and everything, and then coming back and maybe you decide, I want to be diamond instead. I don't know. So, okay, so that last thing I just said, I don't actually know what that means at all. It just kind of like it came out and it sounded nice. That, maybe ignore that though. Cause I feel like I'm on to something there, but like I'm not. Like, I don't have any, like, that was, like, no one, your friend says something and the other one goes like bars or like whatever, like, you know, like that was a cool thing to say. I feel like that was definitely that, but it also just didn't mean anything at all because I didn't have a point there. So don't listen to that. You know, that, yeah, no, I don't know where I was going with that one. Because that was just a thing, I guess. But yeah, listen to the advice you like, get rid of the advice you don't like, cause you'll like just probably be fine, I guess. The brushes just fell. They did not hit my leg this time, as the incident of Paint and Talk. Oh my God, what number Paint and Talk was that, where that tragedy happened? Was it 45, 46? Either way, that didn't happen right there. The painting is done. I want this to be a flatter green, and I keep struggling with this actually. And I don't know if I'm using the wrong green, because this definitely, so this other green I have has more of like a kind of a translucent property to, or no, a more opaque property to it, almost like this yellow where it always goes down flat. But this green just doesn't, like, it just doesn't do that. like it's just always this very, you know, I guess I gotta do this, but even then it's just so streaky. Either way, this is the first of 3 paintings I'm gonna do. I want to do like swirls with inverted colors because I think it looks kind of cool. I also think it'll look cool with all of them next to each other, which is something I definitely want to do. So this is the first of 3. They're gonna be green and yellow, and then blue and red, and then I'm probably gonna do a maybe like a purple and orange if I can figure out how to actually mix a good purple for once, because I think those 3 will look really cool. I also think swirls are really cool. Like, this is like something I'd wear on a shirt. And you know, I almost want to do it in the spirit of like, sometimes I think it's really cool. I think painting things, like my favorite painting I've ever made here is Paint and Talk 47 so far, where I painted that streaming face, and that was like a cool painting. It almost felt like something that was like serious in a regard, right? And I think that's really cool. I also really do like paintings though. They're just like neat, you know? So that's what I was doing here today. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed this whole discussion, got something out of it. As always, you guys know the drill. Go check this out over on the Instagram, angles, bada boom, bada bam, on the story, in the description. And that's the over, under, short, and sweet of that. And as always, until tomorrow, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint and Talk episode 54? 55, 53. I'm here every morning painting and talking with you all. I gotta figure out what number we're at.